Let me thank the chairwoman and thank our witness, Commandant Papp, for his leadership and the leadership that has been given by the United States Coast Guard. I am prone to the work that the Coast Guard has done over the years, and as a beginning and early member of the Homeland Security Committee, I felt that the Coast Guard was a strategic element of the war on terrorism and the prevention of any further attacks on the homeland. And I continue to emphasize both the civilian and military role that the Coast Guard plays in commerce, but it also plays in the security of the nation's citizens. For that, I am eternally grateful and agree that the funding necessary for the Coast Guard to carry out its responsibilities should be our important responsibility. I, too, am glad of the funding of the offshore patrol cutters and realize that even though they may have a life of 40 years plus, it is not the best to continue to utilize equipment that does not have the state-of-the-art technology, although the Coast Guard has been enormously effective in its efforts with the equipment that it has. And I believe that we should continue to seek full funding for the resources of the personnel of the Coast Guard and of the equipment. Admiral, let me make note of Polar Star. I believe one of our major assets of the Coast Guard, and know that if you had reached the Australian research ship, as you had been requested to do, and you were on your way to do so before Mother Nature took hold, all would have been well. So let me thank those who manned that and thank the Coast Guard for being ever ready in its service. As ranking member of the Subcommittee on Border and Maritime Security and a member of Congress representing the Port of Houston, again, as I indicated, I'm well aware of the value of the Coast Guard to our communities and nation. In my own backyard, the Coast Guard works to secure the Port of Houston, among other ports, which is imperative as it is the nation's largest petrochemical complex, supplying over 40% of our petrochemical manufacturing capacity. The Coast Guard also works to facilitate commerce, which is vital to our economy, as the Port of Houston handles nearly 230 million tons of cargo annually, making it the #1 U.S. port in foreign waterborne tonnage and generating over 650,000 jobs at its terminals. Without the Coast Guard, this would simply not be possible. Of course, these examples are just one small part of the service by our U.S. Coast Guard men and women across 11 statutory missions, both here and home and around the world. Given this committee's jurisdiction, the focus of today's hearing is the Coast Guard's Homeland Security missions, including ports, waterways, and coastal security, drug interdiction, migrant interdiction, defense readiness, and law enforcement. I'm pleased to have the Commandant of the Coast Guard, Admiral Robert Papp, here to discuss the future of these Homeland Security missions. Personally, Commandant Papp, I want to thank you for 40 years plus, probably, of service and your true commitment to America's goals, visions, security, and your service to your nation. I know that the men and women of the Coast Guard have benefited from your long years of service, and it is my privilege to simply say thank you. Indeed, this is a particularly appropriate time for him to be before the committee as he completes his 4 years of service as Commandant in May. It is also a critical time for the Coast Guard as budget cuts and recapitalization challenges force the Coast Guard to make some tough choices. Coast Guard has been forced to cut back its hours on water and in the air, contributing to a reduction in mission performance. This is a troubling trend that must be reversed. The Coast Guard already provides the American taxpayers with an excellent return on our investment, and there is only so long we can ask them to continue to do more with less. Frankly, I believe that we should have a goal, as the chairwoman has worked unceasingly on issues dealing with assets, that we should have a commitment of full funding of the Coast Guard. I'm reminded of my own visuals of watching the Coast Guard race up and down the Pacific and in the Caribbean area to track and find drug dealers who have taken to the waterways and taken to the waterways in very large numbers. other means of attacks on the United States are able to approach us through the waterways, and the Coast Guard is one of our first lines of defense. So I'm here to hear from the Commandant and to thank him as well, and to commit to working to prepare the Coast Guard for its 21st century multi-missions that it has. And again, I don't think I miss a time when a Coast Guard is before me to say again, among all the things you've done, and you've done many things, I am very much reminded of the work you did in Hurricane Katrina, in saving the lives of those stranded in the terrible aftermath of the hurricane and the breaking of the dam that faced the citizens of New Orleans, many of whom now live in Houston, Texas. Madam Chairwoman, I do want to acknowledge President Congressman Beto O'Rourke and Captain Gabbett, Congresswoman from Hawaii. Commandant, she is with the Hawaiian Army National Guard, military police, and she did 2 deployments in Iraq, but I take note of her because she was on her 2 weeks of military police training in Fort Leonard in Wood, Missouri. So we missed her for a while at this committee, and we welcome her back, having done her requirements to serve the nation in more ways than here in the United States Congress. So let me thank all of you, and with that, Madam Chair, I yield back.